right, today is the conclusion of our series that we started right after Easter entitled The Greatest Commandment. The Greatest Commandment. And this has been a powerful and convicting series that we, like I said, began after Easter. And we've been looking at the question, what does it mean to love God? What does that look like? When you have been marked by the love of God, when you experience God in a really powerful way, what does it mean to love him back in return with the same love that he had for us? How does that play out in our lives? So what we've been doing is we've been looking at this passage out of Mark chapter 12 in which Jesus tells us how to love God. He tells us what God likes. He tells us what God desires and what he expects for his kids and how he expects his kids to love him in return. So let me remind you of the context really quick. The context is a lawyer. Some translations describe him as a scribe, but he's really a lawyer. He was an expert in the Mosaic law, the law of Moses, comes up to Jesus and asks him this question: which commandment is the most important of all? Now, Jesus throughout his ministry was asked gotcha questions all along the way when he would teach, and these scribes and Pharisees and all these religious leaders would come and ask him all these questions, trying to trap him, trying to label him a false teacher, trying to get him to slip up. Eventually, this now is kind of 1 week before he would actually go to the cross. So this is like a heightened awareness of that. And these people are really looking to trap him so that they can actually kill him. And these people had about 613 laws that they had to follow, that they would impose on the people. And so they would kind of categorize which one was the most important, which one was the least important, and try to follow, obviously, the most important one. And the scribe says, okay, Jesus, which one of these laws is the most important? Which one really communicates the heart of God for our lives? What is the very essence of the law? What is the greatest command? And look how Jesus answers. He says, the most important is this: Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second, he says, is this. Now, Matthew's account says that the second is like this. In other words, the first and second commandment are intrinsically, inextricably linked together. You cannot have one without the other. He says, the second, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other, watch this, it's not plural, it's singular, commandment. So the two are one. There's no other commandment greater than these. So what Jesus does here is he combines two Old Testament passages to show us that the greatest commandment is love. To love God and to love people. We love God with all our heart, with all our strength, with all our soul, with all our mind. And when we do that, we can, out of that flows the love that we have for others. Essentially, Jesus is saying we love God the way that he desires. It's going to impact these 5 areas of your life: your heart, your strength, your soul, your mind, and it's going to flow into how you love others. And we'll see how that plays out. The way you love yourself is the way that you love others. And throughout this series, what we've been doing is we've been looking at these individually. We've been parsing these out. And today we're going to finish up with the last one. How do you love your neighbor as yourself? How do you love your neighbor as yourself? The book of James would actually call this the royal law, the greatest law. Okay, so I'm going to give you a warning right up front before we jump in. Today we're going to go deep, okay? We're going to go to the deep end of the pool. Now, before some of you kind of check out, and some of you are like, oh man, the one day that I brought my friend, really? This is the day? Here, let me explain this. For most people, going deep means, getting a bunch of information and getting a bunch of connections from the Old Testament, New Testament, and we're going to parse out Hebrew and Greek and make all these connections, and we're all over the place, and we're kind of confused, and we feel beat up, and we go out in the lobby, and we meet the second service people, and how was it today? Oh, pastor went deep. What do you say? I don't know. I'm really confused, but it was deep, right? Okay. Deep to me is different. It really is. Deep means let's take the simple, basic things that Jesus taught and actually do them. Okay? That's deep. Like simple truths that are often hard to live out. That means going deep, like actually living this thing out. One of those is love your neighbor as yourself. It's not as easy as we think, right? And I'll just tell you right up front, it's not easy. Some of the things that Jesus talks about are not easy. Dying to self is not easy. Picking up your cross and following Jesus, it's not easy. It shouldn't be easy, right? Seeing others greater than yourself and living in a spirit of humility where you esteem others beyond yourself, that's not easy. Being a do-gooder to people that don't do good in return to you. Loving your enemies. Those things are all basic, these snippets, these one-liners, if you will, that Jesus commands us to do, and they're not easy. That's why we need the Holy Spirit's help to do them. Often what you'll find is that the Christian life is hard. And it can be challenging. And often the simplest commands are the hardest. And one of the hardest areas in the Christian life is loving your neighbor, right? Now, let me say it this way. Actually, one of the hardest things about life is people in general. Come on, somebody, right? Like, life would be so easy if there were not other people around sometimes. It's like Linus said in the Peanuts cartoon, I love mankind, it's the people that I don't like. Now, what I've found is that the way that we handle Christianity and things like this is what I call a bento box spirituality, right? Come on, where are my sushi lovers at? Yeah, let's go. All right. Bento box sushi, spirituality. So you have your rice, you have your rolls, you have your nigiri, perhaps you have some gyoza, edamame, you have your wasabi, you have your ginger, and they're all in these separate compartments. Right? And that's how many of us live out this thing called Christianity. We compartmentalize things. I love God on Sunday, but tomorrow morning with my boss, you better know I'm talking behind his back with my coworkers, right? And that obnoxious neighbor who on every Wednesday morning at 6 a.m. starts his pressure washer, like how many times can you pressure wash your front yard, right? Maybe that's just my neighborhood, but there is a dude, I swear, he may be watching online. We love you too, buddy. I'm so glad that you're here. Right? And then, but guess what? We come back Sunday morning and we love you, Jesus, and everything is good. And we love you with all our heart, strength, soul, and mind. But what we do is we compartmentalize things, thinking that the way we treat people has nothing to do with our relationship with God. Well, Jesus comes along and says, no, our spirituality is not a bento box. If we truly love God, you're going to love people. If you love God, if you say you love God with all your heart, strength, soul, mind, you're going to love your neighbor. You're going to have love for your fellow man. A few weeks ago, I was having a conversation with some counselors at a party when there's a bunch of counselors there, and we were talking about this term called cognitive dissonance. It's a psychological term, and it basically means this, that your beliefs and your actions don't always really align. And it causes a little bit of discomfort, right? For example, many of us know that drinking and smoking is bad for our health, yet we still drink and smoke, and there's this kind of cognitive dissonance as it makes us uncomfortable. Or, we know we should be saving money to get out of debt, and that's the right thing to do, but the moment that you get your paycheck, you go out and buy a brand new pair of shoes, right? Cognitive dissonance. And if you don't feel it, your wife will make you feel it. So cognitive dissonance is where there's this gap between our beliefs and our actions. We know something is right, we believe it, but we're living something else. And there's a whole lot of people that struggle in various aspects of life with this issue. I need to lose weight, but yet I go to Cane's and get chicken, or soon to be In-N-Out. Come on, y'all, let's go In-N-Out, right? Or young people, we know that this hurts our parents, but we're going to do it anyways. We're going to live this thing out, and there's some sort of discomfort. And the reason I bring this up and the reason I contemplate this thought is I would say that one of the primary markers of the American church is cognitive dissonance. What do you mean, Pastor? Well, I mean, there's a gap between our strongly held beliefs and our actions. See, sometimes the church is really good at fighting for what we believe, but we're not really fighting for our actions. We fight over our doctrine, we fight over the right theology, but there's not a whole lot of people doing what that theology and doctrine actually tells us to do. There's this gap between what we say we believe about Jesus and how we actually live and love like Jesus. And this gap, honestly, it saddens me. And I'm noticing that it's starting to get wider and wider and wider in the American culture. In fact, Gandhi said it this way: I like your Christ, I don't like your Christians. Your Christians are so unlike your Jesus. What he's saying here is there's this cognitive dissonance between what we Christians say we believe and what we actually do or how we actually live. And we may say we're marked by God's love and we love God, but we don't actually show that and demonstrate that love. It doesn't really get lived out. So today I want to help you with that. Today we're gonna bridge this gap between what we believe and how this actually gets played out. So the way I'm going to unpack this is I'm going to jump into the Luke account of the same passage to show you that Jesus, in fact, is actually making this very point. That there is a gap between us claiming to love God and love our neighbors. And Jesus illustrates this through a story that's often called the parable, or the story. It's not really a parable. It could have actually happened, but it's a story more called the Good Samaritan. Perhaps one of the most well-known stories of the entire Bible. Even if you're not a Christian, you know this. Literary critics consider it the greatest story ever told. In fact, it's become an idiom in our world for unusual, random acts of kindness, right? We have hospitals with this name, the Good Sam. There's in Portland, right? Charities and organizations use this term. We refer to people as Good Samaritans who find others and help in need and help them in specific and unusual ways. There's actually a law in our country called the Good Samaritan Law, and it varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but basically the Good Samaritan Law protects you if you come and render aid or assistance to a stranger in need, that they can't come back and sue you or hold you liable for what you did to them. So it's really ingrained in our culture. We kind of understand it. Today, what I want to do is I want to unpack the passage. So we're just going to have a good old Bible study so we really understand exactly what this means. And then after that, at the end, I'll give you some practical takeaways of exactly how we can love our neighbors like the Good Samaritan. There was, in fact, a famous, as I was putting this together, it reminded me, there's this famous Princeton seminary experiment that happened in the 70s that's 1970 for you young people, that conducted a study with their own student body in which researchers gathered ministry students in a classroom and told each of them, listen to this, you're going to prepare a message, a sermon on the Good Samaritan that we're going to air on the radio. This is your chance. It's going to get broadcasted. Put your best message together. Come, teach it. You're going to get radio time. This is, you step your game up, right? Now, the thing was, the recordings were to be done in a building that was way across the other side of the campus from where the class was. And unbeknownst to the students, as they were making their way from this class that was finishing up, they only had like a short window. They planted somebody on the road that they would go to that class to give this sermon who was pretending to be ill, to be sick. In fact, this person would even fake a heart attack, right? And he was like clearly despondent and in need of some care. So here these students are, they're going to go teach on this Good Samaritan, right? And these researchers were wondering, what would they actually do? Would they, in fact, be a Good Samaritan and stop and help this person, or would they just kind of ignore them and keep going? What do you think happened? Yeah, multiple answers, but I heard a couple. Listen to this. 90% of the students ignored that person. 90%. In fact, the researcher said one student, in fact, actually, he literally just kind of stepped over the guy. He was right there in his way, right? Man, heartbreaking. Like, this is a powerful modern day, real life recreation of this story. And I really find it believable and at the same time, somewhat troubling and convicting. Like, what would I do? What would you do? And I'm convinced God has a sense of humor, because yesterday morning, as I'm preparing the message on the Good Samaritan, right, and I'm looking over my notes, I get a knock on my front door, and it's this cute little 15-year-old Mormon boy trying to pitch to me Mormonism. And so now I'm like, well, you're not really in need. You're not really hurting. Like, you have your father back there who's like, but I was kind of torn because I'm like, here I am teaching on this thing. And what do? Am I going to just shush this guy away? And like, dude, come on. So we had a great conversation, and it was fine. I gave him some time, not much, but some time. Okay. Let's read the story and see what happens. Here's what happens. And behold, the lawyer stood up, put him to the test. So this word test here is actually the same word that they would use for putting him on trial. I mean, that's what lawyers do, right? They put you on trial. So they put him to the test, and they say, teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? So this guy's asking the right question. It's the greatest question ever asked. I want to have eternal life. Well, how do you answer that? This was a question on the minds of the Jewish people all the time. This was a question that was posed often to Jesus, and you find it throughout the Gospels. So this lawyer was right in asking the question, but he had the wrong intention and the wrong motive. He wants to trap Jesus. And Jesus answers him with a question. It's kind of like your typical Socratic method. You answer a question by, asking another question. It took me years to learn this. I wish I would have saved a lot of heartache had I learned this sooner. But he said to him, what is written in the law? How do you read it? And so this person answered, you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, Jesus did, you have answered correctly. It's almost like you see this big smile on Jesus' face and like, man, this guy's actually listening. This guy, he may be getting it, right? You're paying attention. And then Jesus says something really unique. He says, do this and you will live. So Jesus kind of turns the table and puts this lawyer in kind of a conundrum. He says, he's about to show the lawyer that, man, you can't do this. You're going to fall short of following these commands perfectly. Like so many people of that day in the religious establishment, this man had a lot of head knowledge, but not much practical application. And what Jesus is saying is you can have all this knowledge and you know what to do, but it's insufficient. You got to not just know the knowledge, but you got to live this thing out. You got to put what you know into action. Now, at this point, the lawyer, you would think he would be honest, and he should have said something like, look, I can't love God that way. I mean, I try, but I can't perfectly with all of my strength, all of my soul, all of my heart. I just can't do this, and I can't love my neighbor as myself. I haven't done that. I'm not capable, and I probably won't do it in the future. I can't be holy like God is. I can't fulfill this standard and get to heaven. I'm a sinful person. I need help. If I don't get help, I'm going to miss it, and I need mercy and forgiveness. But he doesn't. What he does is he tries to justify himself. Look at how it continues. But he, desiring to justify himself, so this man's so full of this self-righteous pride, said to Jesus, okay, love your neighbor. Who is my neighbor? Interesting, right? This is the question behind the question, right? This guy wanted like a philosophical, academic level. It wasn't, for him, it wasn't a practical exercise. It was just more of an intellectual exercise. He doesn't really want an answer that's going to change the way his behavior. He has an ulterior motive. Do I have to love everyone? If there's a neighbor that I must love, is there also a non-neighbor that I don't have to love? Where do I draw the line, Jesus? And Jesus replied, and he tells this story. A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell amongst robbers who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. All right, two really important things that I want you to notice here. The road that Jesus talks about doesn't mean much to us from Jerusalem to Jericho, but for them, they would have totally understood it. This is what this road looks like today, and then this was like a 17, 18 mile road, sort of kind of downhill. There's a 3,000 elevation decline in feet. This was the main road that religious leaders would travel. So religious leaders often lived in Jericho, and they would walk this journey to do temple worship. And it was a dangerous road, very rocky, very deserted place. As you can see, it was actually called the Bloody Way because so many people would get attacked. And then that big valley there that you see in that picture, that was actually called the Valley of the Shadow of Death. That's where we get Psalm 23 from. So even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Because people would get like bloodied and murdered. And so that's why when we talk about this is probably not a parable, that a story to illustrate a point. This actually probably was a true story that happened that Jesus is making reference to. And the second thing I want you to notice is the man. Now, what's interesting is the question is, who is my neighbor? So Jesus tells the story that there's this helpless man who fell on hard times. He's beaten, he's wounded, he's stripped, left half dead. But he doesn't tell us anything else about the man or anything about him. We don't know, is this a Jewish man? Is this a non-Jewish man, a Gentile? We're not told of his race. Is he white? Is he a black man? We don't know his religion. Is he a Christian? Is he an atheist? Is he a Roman? We don't know his political affiliation. Well, Jesus, did he vote like I did? Because then I'll help him, right? We don't know his background. We don't know his criminal history. We don't know his socioeconomic status. We don't know if he's an illegal to this country or not. We don't know his sexual preference. We don't know anything about this man at this point. And here's the point that I think Jesus is highlighting. It doesn't matter who the man is. This is a helpless man lying on the road with no resources, no money, and he can't repay you back. He's wounded and he's left half dead, which means he can't help himself. Jesus defines this man not by anything he's done, but by what he can't do for himself. And this is really important for us to get, because for the Jewish nation, this was kind of a dig, because a neighbor to them meant another Israelite. So in Leviticus 19:18, where this passage comes from, it defines your neighbor as only your religious Jew. It excluded everybody else. So sinners were excluded, tax collectors were excluded, prostitutes, non-Jewish people were excluded, Samaritans, they're out. It was only people like us. People not like us. They not like us, right? It was, okay, 2 people caught that. All right. They're not like fellow Israelites and people we like, our kinsmen, right? That's the answer that this Jew is expecting Jesus to give. He never considered that there could be anybody else but a Jewish person. In fact, the Jewish people would understand the 10 Commandments like this. Thou shalt not steal from another Jewish person. Thou shalt not murder another Jewish person. Thou shalt not bear false witness or testimony against or to another Jewish person. There was, in fact, in their sabbatical, in their these 613 laws, a law about the Sabbath, that if a wall fell down on a person, you can go there and kind of look through the rubble, and if the person was a Jew, you can get them out and save them. If they were anything but a Jew, you just have to let them there suffer, right? So their neighbor was like, man, it's Jew or bust. Right? So what does it mean to love others like yourself? Because this puts us into a conundrum as well. Jesus goes on to kind of shatter the prevailing thought of the day. To love others as yourself means to love all people, regardless of who they are, not just the people that we like, not just those that we're comfortable with. Right? And before some of us say, well, duh. I mean, yeah, we know that. Do we? Because many of us fall victim to this, victim of loving just those people that we like. I have a friend that I was talking to, and he would tell me often, life, adulthood is really a simulation of high school. It really is. We have mean girls, we have, the cliques, we have groups that we hang out with, and you have the jocks over here, and you have this over here, and you have these groups, and and it's the same way. We congregate with the same the same neighborhoods. We live in the same neighborhoods of like-minded people. We choose who we're going to hang out with, and we can be really rather cliquey at times. Jesus would go on to say in the Sermon on the Mount, he says, if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. And if you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, so hey, let's make a deal. I'm going to give you some money. You can pay me back, whatever. What? Sinners do that. They expect to be paid in full as well. So loving others as yourself means love those that are even deemed unlovable. that we think are unlovable, the marginalized, the ones that are different, the ones that are left out. When Jesus says, love your enemies, those that wrong us, those that slander us. I was reading the story of Corrie ten Boom just this last week on how she, after giving a talk about her time in a concentration camp during World War II, one of the main people that was like the tormentor comes to her and says, oh, I'm so glad for God's grace and mercy and forgiveness. And he asks her for forgiveness, and she's kind of mortified. She's like, how do I love the person that beat me? How do I love the person that beat my friend that was with me in this camp that she died? Like how do I extend that kind of love? I mean, it was tormenting her. Read the story if you haven't read it. It's a powerful story of forgiveness and how to love your neighbor as yourself. Let's keep going in the story. So it says, now by chance, watch this, a priest was coming down the road, and when he saw him, he passed over on the other side. Now, for lack of a better term, the priest is probably a professional Christian, okay? We don't know if he's trying to go to worship. We don't know if he's coming back from worship. This priest was the person who would intercede to God on behalf of the people. He'd made a request for God. He was probably, doing his religious duties. He would stand in front of the people, modeled the example of what holiness looked like. He wore the holy garments. He said all the right things, but here he is encountering a man in need, sees him, heads over to the other side. I remember this reminded me of a story we had a friend of ours, a pastor friend in California. My wife and I, his name was Ben, and he did this crazy experiment at his church. And this was a very conservative church, suit and tie kind of church, Romanian church, and it was not like we have a storefront. It was kind of out in the middle of a neighborhood, and he was supposed to give the sermon that morning, and he did a beautiful sermon illustration. That morning, he talked to the pastor, and he talked to the ushers, and he dressed up like a homeless guy that was all tattered, beaten up, and just bruised, and he just parked it right up by the front door. And he wanted to see what the reaction of the people would be. Right? And people would walk by, they'd look at him. Some people would grab their kids and shush the kids away. We don't want none of this mess. He said people started talking Romanian about him. He understood. By the way, when somebody talks another language about you, they're probably talking about you. If it's in your presence, just going to give you that from personal experience. Right? And so then the service starts, they do worship and they do all this stuff. And then the pastor gets up, today we're going to have a guest speaker. Back door flings open, this guy comes through. And as he's walking through, he starts shedding some of these clothes, and people start realizing, oh, it's Pastor Ben. Oh, it's Pastor Ben. Right? I mean, convicting, right? But what is Jesus highlighting for us here? There's a danger that if we're not careful, we can become so religious that we restrict our worship to the walls of this church. Nothing outside of these walls, right? And often what religious people do is they'll step over other people just so that they can keep to the tradition, just so that they can keep to the rules, just so they can get to the radio show where they're going to talk about the Good Samaritan. Maybe this guy was trying to protect his image, because when you're religious, you got to step over people to protect your image. Maybe he was going to worship and he had his priestly robe on, and he's going to get dirty and muddy and maybe get blood on his robe. What would the people at church think if he shows up dirty? What would people say if he's helping out a person who is the bad guy? What would people think if this person didn't have the right immigration status, or maybe this person didn't have the right sexual preference? And what if somebody says, hey, man, you're helping them? If you help those people, you're actually affirming their lifestyle. I mean, that's going to affect your image, right? You mean love people like Jesus loves people? You're going to do that? It's really quiet in this place right now. Maybe he was desensitized to the brokenness. Right? He's been walking this road forever. Maybe he sees the same person there all the time. He runs into these people. How many times do we get to the same corner and it's the same panhandler? How many times do we get desensitized and we just, okay, here it is again. We're going to look away. Maybe he's helped them before. We don't know. One of the rules that the priests had is they couldn't touch a dead body because they would be considered unclean. So for 7 days, they would have to be removed. So let's give him a pass. Maybe that's what he thought. Maybe, oh, there's a dead guy. I can't touch him. I'm going to be 7 days considered unclean. Now, Jesus is highlighting to the priest, or to the scribe, that this priest who knew, I got to love the Lord with all my heart, with all my strength, with all my soul, and he still yet steps over this other individual. What do we learn? Here's what we learn. We can't be indifferent. We can't be indifferent. And what I've learned is that the opposite of love, listen, is not hate, it's actually indifference. When we're indifferent to people's conditions. See, he didn't hate this man enough to put him there, but he was indifferent enough to keep him there. And it goes on to say, so likewise, there's 3 dudes that passed by this guy. A Levite, when he came to the place, came and looked and passed on the other side as well. So what is a Levite? Now, a Levite is not a high-ranking, he's not as high-ranking as a priest, but he oversaw the temple and the services and, the temple liturgy. He would help the priest. He would help them lead worship. He served the priest. He was the one who prepared the temple, prepared the offerings. They prepared the place for where ministry would happen. These would be like for us volunteers who serve. They open the door, they usher, they greet, they set the coffee up, they help on worship team, they do various ministries with the kids. They're the person at the door. Hey, so good to see you. Glad you're here today. They give you a hug. They're just good people. Now, the problem is that being good doesn't always mean that you're loving. And the text seems to indicate now that this Levite actually came in a little closer and he kind of looked. So he's not just like initially, oh man, he kind of looks, he kind of gets a picture of what's going on, but he still passes by. We don't know if he was trying to get to worship or maybe he was running late. But we do know that in order to serve God, he's got to step over some people in order to get to open the door at the church, you see. Or maybe they're trying to leave the church. Maybe they're leaving church, and as they're leaving church, there's this helpless man in front of them, and I can't help this guy. I mean, I got lunch plans, right? I'm too busy. A few weeks ago, I quoted the Mad Hatter from Alice in Wonderland. Let me quote another character from that show, and this is the White Rabbit. He says this: I'm late for a very important date. No time to say hello, goodbye. I'm late. And when I wave, I lose the time I save. Many of us live life like this. I'm late, I gotta go. Hey, I see you, but I'm out. I gotta go, right? So maybe we're not indifferent. Maybe we are curious, but we'll go look and we'll take a look. But man, I don't have time. I can't stop, right? The perfect example is when there's traffic, right? And there's an accident up ahead. What do we all do? Slow down, and we're all curious. Wonder what happened. Whoa, look at that car. Wow, that guy looks really hurt. It never dawns on us, maybe I should pull over and help him. We just kind of, we're curious, but we just keep going by. So this priest is perhaps calloused, just walks by. The Levite, perhaps he's interested, but stops to take a look maybe, but again, he's too busy. And Jesus, in essence, is saying to this lawyer, hey, you're right. Love God with all your heart, strength, soul, and mind. Love God as yourself. You've answered correctly. You're an expert. But listen, this is not a philosophical debate. This is our biggest challenge. We got to take it from here and actually implement it and live this thing out. And that's always the hardest part with Christianity, isn't it? Actually living out what we believe and what we say. Now, at this point, this lawyer is probably expecting something else. He's certainly not expecting the story to go this way, but he's probably thinking, okay, I know what the third person's going to do. The third person's going to be just an average Jewish person who comes and helps this guy. Because at the time, the Jewish people were upset with the scribes and the Pharisees and the religious leaders. They weren't really kind of living up to the standard of God. They were kind of doing some shady things. So he's like, I know what Jesus is going to say. Jesus is going to say, here's this average Jewish guy who's faithful, who loves God. He's going to come and he's actually going to be the hero of the story. But watch this. Jesus tells us who the hero is, but a Samaritan. Now, I know we hear that and we think, oh, the Good Samaritan, right? It's so common nature. But for them, this would have been so mind-blowing. The text doesn't say it, but they probably would have been like, what? a Samaritan? That guy's the hero? There's no way. Right? He says, the Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was. When he saw him, so he sees him as well, he had compassion on him. He went to him, bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he set on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii, which was about 2 days' worth of wages, and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back. Now, this was scandalous. If you know your Bible, you would know that the Samaritans had a history with the Jewish people, and they did not like each other. In fact, they hated each other. This goes all the way back to the days of Solomon. When he dies, the kingdom divides. The Samaritans are left after Israel is destroyed in about 722 BC, and people come and they intermingle with these foreign nations, and that's how you get Gentiles and other religions start getting into the mix. And these Jewish people, they hated the Samaritans for actually living that way. By the way, there are still Samaritans in the world today. There's only about 800 of them, and they're somewhere on the West Bank in Israel. There's still a small pocket of Samaritans to this day. But these people did not like each other at that time. They couldn't worship together. In fact, the Samaritans come and say, hey, let us help build the temple. And they say, no, we don't need your help. You guys can't worship like we can. In fact, if you remember the story with the woman at the well who was a Samaritan that Jesus encounters, and then she asks him, hey, how come you guys get to worship in Jerusalem and we have to worship over here on this mountain, on Mount Gerizim? Like, well, what's going on here, Jesus? And Jesus says, man, there's going to be a day coming when we're all going to worship together, because that's what this whole thing was intended to be. But she couldn't go to the same place. These people couldn't even love God with all their heart, strength, soul, and mind. And yet this is the hero. A person who is despised, a person that I don't like, that's the hero. So the 2 men who were supposed to love God with all their strength get caught up in this legalistic and ritualistic rules. They're so out of touch with people. Now, this is such a warning for us, okay? Listen, people matter, everybody. They really do. People matter to God. All people matter to God. All people should matter to us. We got to love and see people the way that Jesus sees people. We got this story paints such a beautiful picture of what it means to have the eyes of Jesus, to see people the way that Jesus does. We got to love people the way that Jesus does. That's what it means to love God. Love yourself like you love your neighbor. This is what Jesus is highlighting. He's highlighting for us that so often we can get into our minds and make Christianity this intellectual endeavor where our Christianity can become nothing more but a classroom. We come here, we have cute services, we talk about how to help the poor, we talk about how to feed the homeless, we talk about how to do these things, but we never go out and actually do them. We just have all these meetings upon meetings. Here's what I want you to pay close attention to. Okay, the neighbor in the story, it would appear, is the person going down from Jerusalem to Jericho that's beaten up and left half dead, right? But watch what Jesus says. This is the epic reframe. Which of these 3, Jesus is talking to this Levite, or to the lawyer, which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell amongst the robbers? Do you guys catch who the neighbor is? Jesus is saying, we're asking the wrong question. The neighbor is not the one that's hurting and beaten and stripped. No, the neighbor is us. The neighbor is you. This is kind of like an epic reframe, right? To some degree, whoever this person is irrelevant. The neighbor is you and I. And he said, the lawyer says, the one who showed him mercy. Did you guys catch it? He's so annoyed that the Samaritan is the hero of the story. He can't even say the guy's name. Can't even say the Samaritan. He says, the one who showed him mercy. And Jesus says, yeah, you're right. Again, go do and be like him. In other words, Jesus says, hey, I'm going to expose your heart. This Samaritan who you don't like, who you think is a dog, a mutt, a half-breed, who you hate is actually a better neighbor than you are. He's the hero. Now, this expert of the law who claims to love God with all his heart, strength, soul, and mind, you're to go do likewise like your enemy. Can you imagine hearing that? And what Jesus is doing here is flipping this whole thing around, and he says, stop asking who your neighbor is, but rather, you go be a good neighbor. Like a good neighbor. Okay. Just making sure you guys are still with me, okay? That's the question. When we're trying to establish who is this neighbor, who's the neighbor, who am I? What am I doing? What kind of person am I? How do I treat others? And Jesus is trying to help us really understand, if we say we love God with all our heart, strength, soul, and mind, can we really say we love him and treat others differently? I mean, these two are tied together, and this kind of takes this whole loving your neighbor thing to a whole new level. Something that we can't really ignore. It's not something like, oh, hey, we're going to have a serve day and everybody's going to go help the neighborhood. No, these are connected. Like if we're loving God, we got to love other people. We got to be mindful of how we treat other people. I love this from 1 John chapter 4. This is the Message paraphrase. I love how it puts it. It says this: if anyone boasts, I love God, and goes right on hating his brother or sister, thinking nothing of it, he's a liar. If he won't love the person he can see, how can he love the God who he can't see? The command we have from Christ is blunt. Loving God includes loving people. You got to love both. Okay, so how, Pastor? How? I told you we're going to get real practical. How do we do it? Let me give you some practical takeaways on how you can apply the Samaritan story to your life. Here's how you love your neighbor as yourself. Jot these down if you're a note takers. First thing is we got to see the needs of others and not only focus on ourselves. Okay? Jesus said you got to love your neighbor as yourself. Now, there are a lot of people who use this command to say, well, in order to love my neighbor, I got to love myself first. And you know, I'm just trying to love myself, PA. I'm just working on loving myself, and I'm just keep working. How long are you going to keep working on loving yourself? Well, till I really do love myself, right? Give me a break. Like, the truth is, we love ourselves too much. Right? We just love ourselves. Jesus is not teaching self-love. He's acknowledging self-love. In other words, Jesus is saying, just as you already love yourself and think about yourself, that's how you're going to love the other person in the same way. Just like you want to get up in the morning and you get dressed and you brush your teeth and you want to do good and you're thinking about the things you're going to do and hopefully you have a good day. That's what your thought should be when you think of others. The Bible says that in the last days, we will be lovers of self. People will love themselves more than anything else. And this is the problem. We're obsessed with ourselves. We love ourselves too much. We even have a word for it. You ready? The selfie. Right? Number one uploaded picture online today is the selfie. Back in 2014, when it actually became a word, there were 92 million selfies a day that were posted online. That's in 2014. 10 years later, 11 years later, 2025, that number has gone up to 5.3 billion selfies get posted daily online. I mean, like, bang, bang, bang. Like, it's just, we love ourselves. Right? And I can prove it if you still don't believe me. If I would take out my phone right now and take a panoramic picture of the whole audience here right now, and I put it on the screen right now, real time, who's the first person you would look for? Yeah, yourself. That's right. Why? Because we're obsessed with ourselves. It's all about us. See, the way to love others is to see not just ourselves, but to see the need. There's so much dignity in just recognizing people. I think we need that now more than ever, just looking somebody in the eye. You walk down a person, you see somebody in the streets or you see somebody in your family. You don't just walk past them and, just casually, hey, what's up? No, hey, how you doing? And what I think messed this up for us is social media. And we can just click like on every picture and think that that's it, or just give a little heart emoji and yay, good job, great picture, and we just kind of move on with life. No, truly seeing somebody, seeing them in the eye, recognizing their dignity, recognizing them as a child of God, seeing them created as an image bearer of God, and seeing that in them really amplifies this thing about seeing others. There's a lot of people that need to be seen today, and they may be a Christian, they may not be a Christian, but they need to be seen and be loved because they need the love of God as well. And when we ignore them and when we just kind of step over them, we're really missing the heart of God. When we walk by, we have to see them. I was doing some reading on an unrelated thing, but it kind of ties in a little bit. Researchers can now, listen to this, measure the vibration frequency of your emotions, okay? So what that means is, when you would talk about, man, I just get some creepy vibes from you, like I'm just getting some creepy vibes from that person, they can actually, there was a study called the Spain study, you could look it up, some MIT researchers came up with this way of seeing the frequency vibration vibes that we all have. And so what they would do is they would give these people questions and questionnaires and all these things, and they would test the vibrations that they would give off. It's kind of like the EKG test the heart. This is the same kind of system. And so what they were able to discover, do you know what the number one emotional vibration that we have is? Anger is what I thought too. It's not. My second choice would have been love. It's not love. You know what it is? Authenticity. 4 times greater than love. And the way they measured authenticity, listen, is that this person was authentic and he actually believed what he was saying. So what his words were saying were true, and he actually lived these things out. So you know what this tells me? When I walk by somebody and I see them in the streets, not just like, oh, hey, how you doing? And just keep walking by. People can tell when you're fake. It's that vibration, that frequency that we give off. Hey, how you doing? How's life going? How's your kids? How's your family, right? Like I'm looking him in the eye. I'm asking him questions. I dignify him as a person. Wow, so powerful. And we can tell when people are authentic, right? We can tell when people fake it. We can tell when people are like, yeah, he's just doing this because this is his job. Of course, he's going to be out there and playing nice with people because he's the pastor. He has to do that. You know how many times I stuck my foot in my mouth out there trying to be way too authentic? I got to learn about, okay. I love this quote by Martin Luther King Jr. He talks about this parable, and he says that the professional Christians, they asked this question: if I stop to help this man, what will happen to me? They were all about the self-image. But the Samaritan asks, if I do not help this man, what will actually happen to him? So being real, seeing people where they're at. Here's the second thing: to love your neighbor as yourself. You got to see people through the lens of compassion. Okay, so it's not just enough to see somebody, you got to have compassion towards them. You can see the passage there. All 3 of these guys came and saw. One saw, looked away. One came and was interested, really kind of checked it out, but still looked away. The third person, the Samaritan, he comes, he sees as well, but he sees through the lens of compassion. Compassion means to be deeply moved, to deeply care, to empathize deeply. The Samaritan will risk his life to help, to spend his money, to go the extra mile. He not only saw, but he was moved to compassion. This speaks about the heart of Jesus. It was said of Jesus that when he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Now, this doesn't come naturally to us. Right? Even the Bible says that we are, in the book of Colossians says, we are to put on hearts of compassion, kind of like clothing. And we need to train ourselves to learn to see people with compassion. How do we have compassion towards the people that are beaten up and robbed and just left for dead? And really, this is a good picture of what I would say is happening in the world today. Many people are beat up by life. Many people have been robbed of their joy by the devil. Many people have lost their purpose and are just kind of left dead. They're discouraged, depressed, and with no sense of hope. I love how one pastor, Pastor Skip, he puts it this way: most everyone you meet in life is either overburdened and under-encouraged. Man, it's so good. And I think it's so true. You know, you go to the mall, you go shopping, you go to Walmart, you go to Target, wherever you go, and just look in people's faces. You'll see it. You'll see that they're overburdened, under-encouraged. Right? Maybe they're working their 3rd shift and it's a single mom who has the kid at home. Maybe you see the waiter who's pulling a double shift because another waiter bailed on them. Maybe the cashier at the store, if you find a cashier now because everything's automated, but if you find a cashier and they're like, right, they're just like, I don't even want to be here. I'm just kind of going through the motion. Right? Now, listen, I know that looks can be deceiving, and sometimes you look at somebody and they don't look stressed. I have one of those faces that when I concentrate or when I'm thinking heavenly upon something, like my face looks like it's really angry. I'm just like really mad, right? Some of you may experience that. I'm really not. I actually had somebody walk by my office the other day, and they saw me, and I was just kind of so intently focused, and they walk in and like, dude, you mad, bro? You okay? Like, can I pray for you? I'm like, thanks for stopping in. No, I'm good. I'm just really concentrating right now, and I just can't, I just have that kind of face, right? So sometimes they're not angry or burdened, but for the most part, man, people are under-encouraged. People are just overburdened and stressed. Listen, I want to encourage you. Be the hero in the story. See the need. See them with compassion. Here's the third thing, what it means to love your neighbor as yourself. It means to be moved to action. So we see him, we're moved with compassion, and now we're going to go do something about it, right? This person went to him, the Samaritan. He physically helped him. In other words, love is seen, love is felt, love is known, love is a verb. It's not just, be a good neighbor, like a noun. No, it's being neighborly, meaning you're loving the people around you. Love is more than a feeling, it's an action. Love gets involved. Look at 1 John 3:18. Dear children, let us not love, the word here is agape, the same word that Jesus used on how to love your neighbor, with words of speech, but with actions and truth. The book of Corinthians says that the love of God compels me to action, right? So we worship God with spirit and in truth, and we love God by acting in truth. Love this quote by Thomas Merton. We're going to close here soon. Our job is to love others without stopping to inquire whether or not they are worthy. This is not our business, and in fact, it is nobody's business. What we are asked to do is love, and this love itself will render both ourselves and our neighbors worthy. I like that. So this person doesn't just ask, hey, let me make sure he checks the box. Let me make sure that if I give him this box, he's going to come to church. And if I serve him, he's going to do the right thing and he's going to come. And I got to make sure that he thinks like me and believes like me. And, he's wearing the wrong shirt. I'm not going to help him. No. God loved us while we were yet sinners. We were not worthy of his love, and yet he still loved us. Can you imagine? Some people think Jesus is like Santa Claus and he gives us everything that we need. But can you imagine if Jesus came with a list of who's on the naughty and nice list, right? And that's the way that he would treat us. Guess what? We'd all be on the naughty list. Some of you are like, that's right, I'm on the naughty list. That's not a good thing, okay? So the way we mimic the love of God is we love people regardless of whether they deserve it. So I want to encourage you. Think about the people that are closest to you. Think about those that are in your sphere of influence. Here's how I think about sphere of influence. 3 ways. People, places, and passion. There's people in your sphere of influence, your people that live with, your family members, people right around you, your neighbors. Then there's places. We go to work, we go to church, we go to the gym, we go to wherever we go to. There's places that we do life, and then there's passions that we have, right? We belong to this pickleball court, or we belong to this gym, or whatever our passion is. We collect stamps. Does anybody ever collect stamps? I didn't think so. I used to do that when I was a kid, but there's one guy. Thank you, brave soul. Yeah, don't raise your hand too high. I know people are laughing already, but that's awesome. I'd love to talk to you about okay. Geeks United, let's go. Okay. So love people that move in, get to know them. In fact, Jesus tells us a story once. He says that if you have a gift and you want to give your gift to the Lord, if you want to bring it to the Lord, and he says if you have an ought with your brother, if you have an issue with your brother, before you bring your gift to the altar, go make peace with your brother and then come and give your gift to God. You know what that's telling us? Is that we can't even worship God properly if we don't go fix our relationships with others. And some of us, we have people in our sphere of influence, our neighbors, our friends, they're broken. What would it look like if today you were to move in and just to say, hey, our pastor was really convicting today. There was not a lot of room for amens, but I got to love. He told me that I got to love. Can we talk about what forgiveness would look like? I want to really encourage you to think about that person, to think about the ways that you can offer and extend that forgiveness. And I know, listen, I know if we would go out to coffee and Pastor, if I could only tell you the story, what this person did to me, they don't deserve my forgiveness. And I would sit there over coffee with you, I would agree with you and say, yeah, nope, they don't deserve your forgiveness, but neither did I. Jesus gave it to me anyway. Here's the last thing, and we close. Love your neighbor is going to eventually require some sacrifice, okay? It's going to cost you. We're going to have to give it some time. We're going to have to invest maybe some resource, maybe some energy, whatever we have. This Samaritan took time. He lifted up the person. He probably got bloodied himself, put the person, it said, on his own horse. That means he had to get off the horse, put this person on his own horse, takes him to the inn, pays for him, puts oil and wine into his wounds, is really ministering to him. I mean, it's going to take some resources. And when we do that, I love this. I'm going to close with this. Worship team, you can come up. This is a quote from Mother Teresa. Listen to this. I'm a little pencil in the hand of a writing God who is sending a love letter to the world. That's so good. So good. That's us when we love others like ourselves. This is what I want to close with. I want to really kind of encourage the worship team to come up. Oh, hey, yeah, check, Donnie, thank you. Go get him. Oh, did you go get him too, Travis? Thanks, my guy. It's awesome. Got me. Okay, listen to this. We're going to close with this. This is really the heart that I have for Journey Church. Please hear me on this. What would it look like if people said about Journey that we were the Good Samaritan? What would it look like? It chokes me up every time I think about this. Like, that's the kind of heart that I want for this church. It's the kind of heart that I want for this community, that we see the need, that we're moving out to the need, that we're seeing people, acknowledging them, that we have compassion, that we're moving to action, that we're spending our resources and our time and our energy. Why? Because we love you. We just love you. And if people would hear that and they would say, man, I have this neighbor, he goes to Journey Church, he's awesome. I don't know about their Jesus. Like, we would have the reverse effect of Gandhi, right? Like, I don't know about their Jesus, but I know this neighbor, he loves well. Those guys are not just about themselves. They're the happiest people. They're always smiling. They're always joyful. They're always encouraging. They're always blessing me. I don't even know if I believe in Jesus, man, but there's something about those people. There's something about the people on the corner of 4th. There's something about Journey Church. When the Queen of Sheba went to King Solomon and he was showing him all this stuff, and she was so moved by his intellect and by his wisdom and all this stuff, she says, what really marks me is how joyful your servants are. What if people would say that about us? Man, how joyful these people are, how loving they are, how kind they are, how amazing. I just want to be their friend. That's my heart, Journey. That's what it means to love your neighbor as yourself. You be the good neighbor. You be the one. You go tell people about Jesus. You go shout Jesus from the mountaintops. You go tell them about the salvation that you received. You go tell them about the kindness and goodness and how God loved you with all his strength and loved you with all his heart and loved you with all his soul, and it was all his mind. And he came and he went to the cross and he said, hey, exactly what the Good Samaritan did is exactly what Jesus did. Jesus was foreshadowing in the future, a prophetic arrow of what he would actually do on the cross. He went to the cross because he loved you. He didn't just sit from heaven and say, hey, can you hear me? I love you. No, he came to show us his love. He was moved with compassion. He saw us. He saw that we were beaten, broken, bruised, bloodied. The devil made a mess of things. I'm going to go fix it. I'm going to give my time. I'm going to give my resources. I'm going to give the most precious thing that I have, my very son, God says, so that they could have life, so that they can be taken and be restored and made whole. That's our heart. That's the heart that God wants for me. That's the heart that God wants for you.